The strong odor of alcoholic beverage emanating from her person, according to your report, correct?
Correct.
And you observed that she was swaying from side to side, her eyes were bloodshot and glassy.
Correct.
And are those the facts on which you determined that she should be placed in protective custody?
That was due to my training experience. That's what I believed when she was intoxicated.
And what's the standard for placing somebody in protective custody? Is that a danger to themselves or others?
Yeah, unconscious, medical conditions, danger to themselves or property, and disorderly.
Okay. So as I'm reading your report, then after you had started to handcuff her, she made some statements that have been redacted here, but that raised a concern about her physical condition in your mind, I guess.
Sir.
And so you escorted her to Emerson, whereas normal protective custody, you could have taken her back to the station and held her there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions for Officer Mahoney?
Just one. Is there a difference in the way someone's eyes look if they're crying versus drunk?
I don't know. I mean, I guess everyone's eyes are different when they're crying, right? Some people swell up, some people don't. I don't know. When we're trained, we look for bloodshot and glassy eyes due to intoxication.
So my question for you is, were you pretty immediately aware that she was intoxicated when you viewed her, or did you, sort of take a while to come to that determination, or?
Well, the way when she was standing there talking to me, she was swaying side to side, but further investigation, I was listening for the slurred speech and observing her eyes and try to get an odor of her breath, which I then smelled the alcoholic beverage.
Okay, and all of those things were sort of present?
Through the investigation, I determined that she was intoxicated.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Officer Mahoney? Janet, sorry.
In your experience, and you probably have more experience with it than I do, but can somebody just display all those characteristics, all those symptoms of being intoxicated and not actually be intoxicated? I'm just wondering, because I know there are people who can drink a whole lot, in my estimation, and, I'd be flat out on the ground, but they're still standing and holding forth. But I just was wondering if...
I've never come across it. I would assume so, but the odor of the alcoholic beverage, it would be hard to make up.
Okay.
Sure.
If she had not said things further, it sounded like she was a danger to herself, or?
Yes.
Would you have, if she just were appearing intoxicated, would that have been enough to bring her to the hospital, or it was just because she had that on top of that?
Well, to the hospital, if she had needed medical treatment, absolutely, we brought her to the hospital. If we brought her back to the cell and she said anything regarding medical treatment, that anything was wrong, she would have gone to the hospital, yes. We were obligated to bring them to the hospital.
But she wouldn't have been brought into protective custody just from being intoxicated?
A harm to herself. She had possibly driven there already. She said that she wanted to go home. I believe that she was intoxicated, that she would possibly drive again. And then when she began chugging the rest of her alcoholic beverage, that was the final piece that I needed.
So I think I'm trying to get some clarification as far as what your exact answer to Franny's question is. If you had just determined that she was intoxicated and had said nothing further, would you have brought her to the station, or would you have brought her home, or would you have brought her to the hospital?
She would have gone to the station, and then a adult could have come and taken responsibility for her.
Very well.
Okay, thank you, Officer Mahoney.
Yep.
So, Carolyn, you wanted to ask Mr. Chang some more questions?
All set. All right.
Mr. Chang, having watched the video and the subject's demeanor, The way she was sitting at the bar, is that the way she usually sat at the bar when she was waiting for takeout food?
Just the way she's been doing that for a long time.
So that was her posture.
Sorry, Carolyn, can you speak a little closer to the microphone?
Oh,
No,
yes,
closer to,
and
yeah,
her
sorry.
posture that the board just observed is the posture that you observe every time she comes in.
Right.
And most of the time when she comes in, she orders takeout food and she leaves.
Right.
And her speech to you was the
No
same
dif-
as it
no
normally
difference.
was?
No difference.
And you made this determination, having this conversation with her before you served the alcoholic drink, is that correct? Okay. And just so that you have in your mind that although it's not the best posture in the world, that's normal, that it was, that this is something that, we know this person.
Okay, any questions from the board for Mr. Chang? Peter?
Well, I mean, I watched the video. The woman did not show any, obvious overt signs that she was intoxicated. The video went on for about a half an hour. On the other hand, as soon as the police officer began to speak with her, he determined she was intoxicated. I mean, there was a strong odor of alcohol from her breath. She was swaying from side to side. He remembers that she was slurring her words. Do you have an explanation for that? I mean, I don't, that doesn't compute.
Okay, all I know is she was on the phone, but she did not, the voice, the conversation, the voice is not high. And it doesn't bother me because even the customer around, they did not pay special attention to what she said. And she did not use any dirty language, not slurring, not high voice, not high motion.
Counsel, you, the last time you were here, I don't have the documents from then, but you were a number of steps you were going to take to assure us that, I mean, clearly the video's been fixed, but wasn't one of them this interaction with customers and looking them in the eye and...
Yes, and that's what we've done. And I think that we don't want to say that the officer is, that it's not accurate in what he saw, but we have to understand that he's walking into the building having a husband call and say, this woman is intoxicated. So that's what he's expecting when he goes in there, whereas whether we have violated the law is in that interaction prior to the service of the drink. And I think that that's because that's what it is. It's visibly intoxicated as of the time that the drink was served. And I think that when you see this, it's, she looks, albeit maybe a little upset she's on the phone, but I mean, everybody's entitled to that. But nothing I would think that would show any visible signs of intoxication at the time that she was served the drink. Now a half an hour later, when the officer is talking to her, we don't know if or whether she had anything prior at home. But she did not show it at the time she was served the drink. Now, again, a lot of time went by, and as you could see from the video, she's having an intense kind of phone conversation, something that looks like she's a little bit upset. And could the signs a half an hour later been there? But I think we could see from that she was not showing them when she was served the drink. And that's what we have to focus on, not whether at the time that when the officer was talking about her, she was showing those signs. It's at the beginning of the tape. And we believe we've had, we told you we have regular employee meetings. We've gone over this and all of those, and you have the owner who was the one who was engaging her, and especially because, as he said, he testified to that he walked in and she usually has a takeout order ready to go, and he asked her, had you called? And she said no. So there was an interaction between both of them when he could determine that she was going to, whether she was intoxicated or not. I just don't think that there is substantial evidence in this case to support a finding that she was visibly intoxicated at the time that an alcoholic drink was served to her. And that's not inconsistent with what the officer is testifying is happening, you know, a full half an hour later, and after she's had, and from Mr. Chang's testimony, appears to be a conversation with her mother, and she's a little upset. So I think that that the evidence is consistent with both parties' interpretation of what happened here.
Just one more question. When is the hearing scheduled on the original suspension?
May 6th, it's
yeah.
Wednesday morning. It got changed from 10 o'clock in the morning until 12:30 in the afternoon because of the ABCC schedule.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. for Mr.
Searching,
Chang.
just to make sure, normally the chair calls on people, so go ahead, but just.
No, sorry. Mr. Chang, when the subject entered your restaurant, did you at all observe that she had bloodshot or glassy eyes?
I didn't see that.
Okay, good. Did you observe her exhibit any signs of physical distress, for example, crying when she was on the phone?
No, not before the phone, before the conversation, no.
No. During the time she was at the bar while she was on the phone or while she was sitting at the bar and eating and drinking, did you notice that she exhibited any physical signs of distress, like crying?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So, and then, Ms. Chang, I just had a question for you. From the video, it was a little bit hard to tell, because there was no sound about exactly when she had ordered the drink, but it didn't seem like there was much conversation between you and her prior to that. So what exactly had you spoken to her about? Was it just her ordering the chicken wings and the drink, or had you had a bit of a back and forth with her?
Well, actually, I start the conversation right before she sat down anyway, because I know her from the past, years that I met her. I know, and I already said, Stacy, did you have an order? Why she was walking, sit down. She said no. And at the same time, she trying to get a seat, and she said, no, I just want to get a bite tonight.
Okay. And you said that, and you did not smell alcohol on her breath at all?
No,
Okay.
absolutely no.
And you said that she normally comes in and gets takeout, so she's not normally drinking at the
No.
restaurant?
She called in for takeout. She leave a name for Stacy all the time. And then before she pick up the order, she always sit at the bar for a drink. Sometimes waiting for the order, sometimes she just want to have a drink before she pick up the orders.
So I'm a bit concerned about that, because I'm pretty sure one of the conditions we've had previously is that people can't be drinking at the bar while waiting for takeout.
I've never seen any kind of condition on that.
I'd have to look back. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
it was prior to my time on the board, but it was a
Yeah,
previous
I
condition.
I recall seeing that, and I don't know if it was just a standard, or if it's,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just specific to this restaurant. I thought it was a general condition in our town that if you're ordering carryout, you can't order drinks too.
Lisa, do you have that sheet you gave us? Not on you. I'm trying to pull it out. Okay. Okay, are there any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have,
Yep, Janet.
the question, yeah, I watched that whole video, and I honestly, I'm no expert, but it certainly didn't seem as if she was having any difficulty maneuvering, and she's not a small, agile, nimble person, but she seemed to get into that chair and out of it without, stumbling or anything like that, which some people who are completely sober are incapable of doing. Yours truly, but I was wondering I don't remember seeing how far, I don't know who can answer this question, how far, where she lives and how far she had to drive to get to the restaurant, and then how her car was parked in the parking lot. I mean, it just, if she was pretty inebriated, she drove along some distance to get there, and then she apparently managed to park the car without driving it into the front of the restaurant, but I don't know if anybody can say. I just was curious because I was wondering, Officer Mahoney, do you happen to know about how far she drove? You don't want to mention the address, but.
Okay. She drove from the Nagog Woods area
Okay,
to the Maka, and then Officer Collins was the first one at the Maka and observed the vehicle. And I actually didn't even observe the vehicle. I just went directly into the restaurant.
Okay, that's all right.
So just for the record, from the document that Lisa had put together and the police had put together of past over-service violations for any place in town, one of them was at a ruling on November 14th, 2005, dating from an over-service or from a DUI on August 13th, 2005. It says that the board's decision was no alcohol for takeout customers, as well as a 4-day suspension following a 3-day stayed suspension. So, I mean, that's concerning to me. You know, we'd have to ask counsel if that was a permanent, my understanding was that was a permanent sort of condition on the liquor license, so I'm a bit concerned that. Okay. I'm sure it's not on the actual license, but I think it was a condition that the board in 2005 put on the license. Yeah, I don't.
I'm not, but in any event, that's not relevant to the.
No, sure, but well,
But I think what is relevant tonight is that.
sorry, can you do it at the microphone? No, just at the microphone, sorry, Karen.
Yes,
It's
I'm
just,
not
we
used
are
to.
on TV now.
Usually they tell me that I'm loud enough for the whole room anyway. But what I'm saying is that, again, just focusing on this particular case, I think that the video speaks for itself, and that at the time there wasn't that, and we continue to follow. I was not aware of any such condition on the license, and I will do a thorough review to make sure that everything that I have is up to date, but we are complying with everything that we promised to do before. I mean, I have provided you with the employee manual that we went out, we're having the meetings. This was, we're sorry we're here, but we just don't believe that this is one of those situations where you can find a violation.
Franny?
It's not a question, it says.
So deliberations, we'll do that once we've closed the public hearing and have actual discussion. So are there any other questions? Okay, and before we close the public hearing, is there anything else, Carolyn, you'd like to say, or anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak? Okay. Can you just state your name and address,
Yes,
please?
yes, Katie.
Thank you.
My name is Anthony Cardulo. I'm a friend of Ray's and a patron of the Makaha, and I'm surprised we're back here again. Surprised at this whole hearing, surprised at some of the questions I'm hearing, surprised at the prosecution that borders on persecution that's going on with this situation. We got some good cops in this town. We got some damn good cops in this town. I'd say some of the best cops in the state. We can afford an educated and smart police force. Frankly, we need one because we're an educated and intelligent community. You saw Officer Hammer was here earlier. You got Officer Mahoney here now. These guys are specimens. They're smart, they're strong, and they do their job in the street real well. Now, this over-serving thing. Somebody gets a drink, and we're in front of town council. I don't get it. I didn't get it last time. I don't get it now. This is a little bit silly. Now, the last one, we talked about Poe's Barbecue. They got a warning for serving a Mai Tai and a beer to 3 people. Now, some of the things that weren't brought up by the police reporting here was that in Officer Joachim's report, he clearly states these people admitted to drinking in the parking lot, something that wasn't brought before this council, yet this council moved to warning. This council is embarrassing itself. 1 drink and we're sitting here an hour later with an over-service. Katie, you're talking about stuff 10 years ago on a 4-day suspension? You're going after a little hard. So I can't go into the Makaha and while I'm waiting for takeout, take the edge off my day, have a drink at the bar. Katie, I know you don't drink, and that's fine. You don't maybe understand a lot of this. But I can't go in, take the edge off my day, and while I'm waiting, get out of the house, have a drink, pick up my takeout, and go home. Suddenly, Ray, one of the best bartenders in the area, 19 years experience, is in front of town hall again. This has gone too far. I don't know where the impetus for this is coming from. I don't know whether it's from this council or from the executive end of the police department. I know the cops on the ground I've seen at the Makaha doing their job efficiently, effectively, impartially, trying to resolve problems at the lowest level as they should. Can you get a ride home? We don't want to take you into custody. We can fix this. On January 25th, when Officer Collins showed up at the Makaha, he commended Ray for his actions, because Ray's button is in his sling. He could have let somebody leave the Makaha and drive, but instead, Ray followed TIP's protocol to the letter, with an escalation that ended in him calling the police. And him calling the police, he put himself in a very actionable position, because he knows that the injustice that he's been subject to is going to be brought up again. He can't assume that he can call the police and feel comfortable. He can assume that once he sits at the executive desk of the police department, that he's going to be in front of this council again. But he did the right thing. And because he did the right thing, he got his license suspended, lost employees, lost money. And that judgment was based on a council that hadn't even seen the TIPS manual until 15 people came up to support Ray last time to get that license reinstated. This is an injustice. This shouldn't be happening here. Not in the town of Acton. Not here where the police should be supporting community businesses. Certainly, if there's a shoplifting at Kmart, the police don't call you in front of town council. According to the 25th Amendment, we're allowed to drink in this country. The ads say drink responsibly. That doesn't mean be a teetotaler, have a beer every hour and then go home. It means if you want, hey, get loose, but make sure you got a designated driver and make sure you don't act a fool. Because if you act a fool, you're gonna expect to see Officer Mahoney in the lobby escorting you wherever you need to go. It's up to the individual to decide their level of consumption. It's not Ray's fault some guys can't handle it. In this case that's currently before us, where a woman leaves her house, husband calls the police, says, my wife is out there driving half in the wrap, and Officer Collins, because he's a good cop with good observational skills, observes a truck in a parking lot, goes in there, handles it, calls Officer Mahoney, gets the situation dealt with. We don't need to take it any further. Officer Mahoney handled it at the lowest level. Why we're going after Ray is beyond me. It's madness. The right thing was done at the time. So yeah, Ray's sitting across from a bar. He can't smell her breath. He's got 3 feet between him, and he's in a bar where the effluent smell of alcohol is everywhere. It's the primary reason for that business being in existence. You can't smell it if you go into a bar. You can't. And he wasn't looking for it. He knows this woman, he's comfortable with her. So, again, I'm surprised I'm here again. I'm surprised we're still doing this to Ray. I don't know why we're doing this. I don't. But it's got to stop. This over-serving, this reaching back 10 years to find a precedent on a liquor license. It's an injustice. We need to support our local businesses, end this madness, and move forward in the town of Acton so we have a healthy community and a healthy relationship between police officers and their business. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay, then I'm going to close the public.
I just have, I'm sorry, just have one question for council before we close the hearing. It was my understanding, I understand your argument about, in your view, the video doesn't show serving a clearly intoxicated person, which is a violation of the statute. It's my understanding that in this hearing, the question is whether the revocation that the license we restored pending this hearing should again be revoked, which doesn't necessarily require a finding of a violation of the statute. And so I just wanted you to get an opportunity to address that issue.
Well, I would think that if you come to, and the licensee has now relied on the stay, that without a violation of law, that it would constitute arbitrary and capricious action. Because you're basically saying that for the mere fact that we're here, that you're going to revoke a stay. And as I said, I don't think that I think that by any standard, most would find that to be arbitrary and capricious. That the basis of any revocation of a stay would be that there was in fact an infraction of law, and that's why we're saying, and there is none in this case. Again, the hearing before the ABCC is in a matter of weeks. The town council and I have traded the pre-hearing memorandum is done, and we've submitted our list of witnesses, and we're ready to go forward. I have no intentions of asking for any kind of a continuance, and we, as this gentleman said, I mean, we're operating a business, and to think that the town would revoke. And again, granted a stay is relief, but that once you've granted the relief and everybody's operating on it, that you should have a pretty good reason to revoke it, and we haven't given you one.
Okay, Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing and speak a bit to what Peter said. I mean, you know, what our council has told us is that there are two things we can either, well, there are many things we can do, but there's sort of two questions before us, whether this is a violation of, I'm going to get the chapter wrong, Chapter 138. Thank you, I think it's like Chapter 138, Section 60, but whether there was a violation, which is not, we've used the word overservice, it's not actually overservice, it's whether or not somebody's served a drink while visibly intoxicated, as Mr. Chang's counsel has spoken. And then we can also, regardless of whether or not we feel that that was a violation in this instance, we have, you know, as you mentioned, Peter revoked the liquor license, and while we've given a temporary stay, you know, the Makaha is sort of operating under the board's discretion at the pleasure of the board. And so, you know, it's in the memo we had from council, she says that, you know, it's whether the board believes the Makaha should have the ability to continue to sell liquor pending the ABC's decision, which will probably be about 6 weeks from now, and whether they're operating effectively on probation during the stay period. So I don't know if people have comments or thoughts. Franny?
My impressions, and I would say to Mr. Cordulo that nobody has accused the Makaha yet. We're just getting information. And my observations are that everybody's done a great job here. This is my impression, is that the police did an excellent job of caring for the community and this woman, and her husband did the right thing by calling, and I don't see evidence that Mr. Chang saw an intoxicated person and fed them a drink. And so my opinion is that we would not find unusual behavior. I don't see proof that the Makaha has violated the law in this case. That's just my impression. And so I would suggest that we don't do anything to change the stay.
Janet?
Given that I was the one who originally didn't agree with the revocation on the basis of even less information than we have today, I still don't agree with the revocation. And frankly, the video, it just showed me somebody who was maybe distressed, but I didn't see, you know, as I said, I didn't see any evidence that she was having the kind of difficulty that I would have anticipated somebody who was really inebriated would have in manipulating on and off and on that bar stool. So right now, I think that the police did the right thing. They're here to protect the community, and they did a very good job of protecting her. And I do think that the Makaha did what they did to start with. We had that really scintillating video to watch. But I think that it was, what I saw was inconclusive, and I was going to ask the question about, okay, what happens if you're at a bar and you're serving alcohol? I know what it's like if you're working around alcohol. Your nose just sort of goes. You don't notice it. But if you come from a place where you haven't been around alcohol, boy, oh boy, it is really potent. If somebody goes to lunch and comes back to the office and has been drinking, it's really quite pungent. So I just don't see any reason to change. I mean, I think that we suspended the revocation. I don't want to confuse things by saying we're going to revoke the suspension or whatever. It would be a matter of just whether we reinstate the revocation and get rid of the suspension. And I don't see any reason to change that. I think that with the hearing on the appeal scheduled for 2 weeks, I think that the applicant is very aware of that, the importance of that. And, you know, frankly, in the next 2 weeks, if something else happens, then maybe I'll have a different opinion, but I don't see, I mean, just what I've seen is not enough to convince me that we need to take extra measures. Certainly doesn't rise to the level of a violation, but I don't even think that I'm prepared to say that we have to suspend the suspension, so.
Thank you. Peter?
I think I generally agree with what's been said so far. I mean, the owner appears to have put in place all the kind of controls that council assured us would happen last time. I think having the video made a huge difference. We didn't have videos before. I think maybe the woman's obvious emotional state, upset, contributed to the interaction with the police officer. Clearly, the officer did the right thing, but I'm not going to recommend at this point that we lift this. We lift the stay, or lift the stay of the revocation.
Language gets tricky. Yeah, there you go. Ching Sung.
I would like to say that I agree with generally what's been said as well. I would like to add, though, it does concern me that Mr. Chang and Officer Mahoney observed different physical characteristics in the subject or the woman in question. I understand that, like Ms. Sadachi said, the odor of alcohol could be perhaps be masked by, by the circumstances under which the woman was encountered, but physical characteristics such as bloodshot eyes, is something that should not change. That observation should be consistent. But overall, I believe that the evidence is inconclusive. I would just like to add that point.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to say also in response to Mr. Cardullo, the reason it's important to us and the reason I believe it's here in front of us just from one case is that the most important thing is to keep people safe. And I would feel so awful if a decision I made, well, you'd never know, but it, led to someone driving drunk and killing someone or hurting someone in another way, or themselves. It would sit so poorly with me so that's why it's important to me to make sure that our alcohol establishments are doing the right thing.
So no, we've closed the public hearing. So I just want to say, I agree with the board, and I want to thank Mr. Chang and council. They've, I think, done a lot since some of the previous hearings, and the video has really, as other people mentioned, help in this case. I mean, it's hard because we can't see, it's not a quality video where you could see somebody's eyes or obviously smell the alcohol or anything. So those are things that, as others mentioned, are a bit of a discrepancy between Mr. Chang and Officer Mahoney, and, who kind of knows what happened in the in-between. But I think that you guys have made strides towards trying to deal with some of these issues, and I do appreciate that. Again, I'm, a bit concerned that somebody that kind of clearly appeared visibly intoxicated to the officer a half hour later and not having had much to drink was initially served. So that's, I hope you guys keep doing the meetings and working on that. And I would hope also that you go back and look at the conditions, because unfortunately, the conditions that board voted in 2005, unless I haven't seen anything that's indicated that they were overturned or that it was just for a set period of time. So I hope you'll kind of follow up on that and make sure you understand all the conditions to the license.
My understanding is that conditions that are on a license, because the public has the right to know under what terms and conditions the license is being operated under, that the conditions actually have to appear on the face of the
actual
license itself.
Okay.
That's been my experience. So,
Well, yeah, I don't know that part, so I can ask her.
but, I can
license,
deal with counsel. I mean, nobody wants to fight. We'll just figure out, though I don't agree with the condition, but that's for another day.
Right. Well,
But, well, we'll see. I'll talk, I think Nina's coming back on Wednesday.
yeah,
So
she's so tonight.
I'll be happy to talk to her.
Okay, so I think, it sounds generally like the board does not feel that there is a violation in this case of the general laws, nor that we want to overturn the revocation or the stay of the revocation. So I think we should deal with them separately, but I think we should have a motion related to not finding a violation of the general laws.
You want, because we have to address the violation, or just move, can't we just move to take no action? Or move,
I think we have-
move to not to find no violation?
I think that was a move not to find a violation. of
Move
the-
to find no violation or not to find a violation?
Yeah.
I think to find no violation.
To find no violation.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
And so then we leave it at that, or do we
I
have to, you want to move on the second part, we just leave it
I mean,
as
if
it?
we're staying as is, then I
We've
don't.
already suspended the revocation
We've
pending
stayed the
here, so
revocation,
just
right.
leave the status quo.
Yes, I don't
Yeah.
think we need a motion on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you guys on the 6th. All right. I'm going to take things a bit out of order, just because, oh, Charlie, yes, I'm sorry.
Now that
Can you
you've-
state your name, please, sir?
Charles Cadillac, Paul Revere Road.
Thank you.
Now that you've taken a vote, I have a very brief comment.
Okay.
I think we're spending a lot of money on legal fees, and from what I now know about this case, this did not need to come to this level with money being spent to review what is rather obviously not a problem.
Okay, thank you, sir. So as I said, I'm going to take things a bit out of order, just because I think we can do there are people here for some of these other issues, and the liaison assignments can be done at the end. So do we want to do Steve, the reorganization of the Municipal Properties Department?
Thank you. As many of you are aware, Dean Charter will be retiring. Well, first of all, let me back up. Under the town charter, the town manager may reorganize any department under his jurisdiction with the approval of 3 of the selectmen. And come this July, Dean Charter, who's worked for the town for 40 years, will be retiring. As many of you know, he's been the municipal properties director, he has been the tree warden, and over the past year, anticipating that Dean would be retiring, and given the fact that one of the selectmen's goals was to come up with, develop succession plans for each town department, we started brainstorming about how to address Dean's retirement. And one of the models we've looked at, which other communities that happen to have a municipal properties department tend to have those under the DPW director in the DPW department. So I put together basically a work group of consisting of Dean, Corey York, the DPW director, and Marianne Fleckner, the HR director, and they've met pretty much weekly since early in this year to really look at what the best organizational structure would be to address this transition period for the town. And this included looking at all the jobs in municipal properties, rewriting some of the job descriptions, and things like that. And as part of succession plan, we try to look at an organizational structure that would increase the efficiency and cohesiveness of the whole municipal properties department. And what that really means is that right now there are basically 2 divisions within municipal properties. One deals with the buildings, janitorial, et cetera. The other deal with grounds and trees. And we wanted to make sure that we developed a system where we could utilize people in kind of both jurisdictions, in addition to perhaps using highway personnel if a large tree or something needed to be dealt with. So what we wanted to do was give the DPW director the necessary tools to bring all the DPW staff together in order to deal with the situation as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, one of the recommendations is to, and currently there are 2 crew leaders within the Municipal Properties Department. One deals with the buildings, that being Dale McGilvery. One deals with the grounds, and that being Biff McGregor. About a year or so ago, I guess it was a year ago, town meeting, in the FY15 budget, the position of arborist was created so that we could keep up with all the responsibilities that deal with tree management within the town. And one may not think that's a big deal, but they're constantly not only have to worry about dead trees, dealing with utilities, dealing with storms, dealing with jurisdictional issues of whether a tree is on town property or private property, a so-called line tree, and things like that. So one of our recommendations is to create a 3rd crew leader, that being a crew leader who would be using their arborist specialty, which dealing with trees would include having the necessary pesticide licenses and knowledge of right-of-way and things such as the line trees, as I've mentioned. And under Mass General Laws, Chapter 87, it specifically states some of the requirements for municipal tree responsibilities. And in essence, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, the state changed the requirements for tree warden, requiring somebody actually have the necessary licenses, educational training as an arborist, and have a few years of experience. So because I think, as we know, every time we go through a storm, tree issues become a big thing in this town. It really needs to get elevated to its proper attention. So right now, we have a municipal properties director. In essence, our proposal would be to change that to a municipal property superintendent, in essence, putting that position parallel to, for example, the highway superintendent, and making it one under the DPW director. That position would report to the DPW director, town engineer. Once again, reallocate the arborist to a crew leader. That would be a little higher level position. And then we have dean. Now, many of you are aware that under state law, once somebody retires from municipality, they can work 960 hours a year without jeopardizing their retirement. Our plan would be to keep Dean on as the tree warden, using his 960 hours per year as a transition period for 1 to 3 years. So given his vast years of experience, he can help guide and train the new crew leader so that person can be cognizant of all the issues revolving around trees. And, you know, a tree warden sometimes is not a popular job. One has to determine sometimes if trees need to be cut down or not, and has to have public hearings. Also, if one person objects at that public hearing, whether that tree is cut down or not comes to this board for a final determinant. So there's a lot of issues that are involved. But once again, keeping Dean on under his 960 hours would assure that we'd get the proper training as we move forward. And this is the current org chart of Municipal Properties Director. The 2 crew leaders that I talked about, one for the ground, one for the building, and then kind of on the side, we have an intern that's the energy, works with the Green Committee for Energy Conservation analyst. This is our kind of engineering organization, with Corey as the DPW director, Paul as the assistant town engineer, and Chin as the civil engineer and surveyor. And this is our proposed organization with Corey at the top. As you can see, we would have a highway superintendent, mirror that with the municipal property superintendent, and that would be on a parallel with the assistant town engineer. And under that municipal property superintendent, we'd have 3 crew leaders, one for grounds, one for the proposed crew leader arborist, and then one for the facilities and buildings. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? sorry?
There was a vacant spot in the organization chart. Do you have a plan for that vacancy?
Let me go back to which one you're talking about.
Municipal properties vacant.
Correct, that we would have to advertise and fill that position.
Janet?
Is Corey's title going to become DPW director? Because
It already is.
It is? Because
It's
I mean, I've always thought we didn't really have sort of a DPW department because we had all these components of it. I didn't realize that it had officially become DPW.
Well, actually,
I know
it's-
other towns have. and I-
Right. That position was DPW director even before I started. When Bruce Damsky was in the position, he was DPW director, town engineer.
No, because I always thought it was the engineering director. I thought you had a whole bunch of directors and then they all reported to you. And
No.
I didn't realize that. Okay, so we do have a DPW. Okay, thanks.
My only question, Steve, is will you sort of be over the 1 to 3 years just phasing Dean out? Will the...
We will phase Dean out.
Okay,
I hope
so
he's
there
not
would-
watching tonight, but...
Sorry.
No, that's the plan. And if the arborist crew leader, is a quicker learner, it'll be
Right.
sooner. I mean, I think Dean would like to get on with a new phase of his life as well.
So, but you would sort of, the arborist crew leader would become the tree warden? Will
Correct.
that move him up the chart to where Dean is, or sort of still on the level of?
Well, it'd still be the same level. Tree
Okay.
warden would be one of the responsibilities of
Okay,
that
of
crew
that,
leader.
okay,
Yes.
excellent. And, just take this moment again to thank Dean. It's sort of incredible to have somebody who's been here for 40 years and serving the
A few
town,
people would
so-
have a town street named after him.
Yeah, exactly, right. Lives on the street with this name. Peter?
I think in your memo, you talk about the tree warden being crew leader, supervisor of the grounds crew and the tree crew, so you're now keeping that split
Well,
apart.
we're keeping it split. I mean, that might be something that
Okay.
evolves down the road, but I think for now, it would make sense we keep it split till we get some experience in the arborist position.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in just talking to Dean, I mean, for one thing, there are, now invasive species are much more an issue than they were a long time ago. He's been recommending, even he, with all of his experience, wasn't aware that some tree he was recommending until he went to some conference is actually an invasive species, so he's now not recommending that tree anymore, I guess. Also, that he's been very good about keeping the town on the Tree City list, and that should be a priority.
And we just
So,
actually just got notice today, we are a Tree City again. Just
Okay, great.
got it in the mail today. The other thing that I think is very important, and Dean has done an excellent job, is working with NSTAR to get them to do a lot of tree trimming, getting them away from the, the power lines and things like that, and in essence, making our jobs a lot easier. The more they do it, the less hassles we have during bad weather.
Okay, any other thoughts or concerns? Okay, then can we have I guess you just want a motion to approve the plan, or
Yes.
can I have that motion?
I move that we approve this plan for the Department of Public Works and Municipal Properties merger.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. All right. Then we're going to move on to the discussion of Land Use Economic Development Director role.
Maybe I can start, I asked for this to be put on the agenda. I mean, this is a position that the town has talked about for a long time. Finally, we're able to fund it. Evolved a little bit through the budget process because of some cuts. Originally was 2 positions, now has been combined into 1 position. In looking at the job description, I originally was thinking that there is a lot more land use stuff in here than economic development, but in rereading it, I see a lot of stuff that talks about economic development strategies. I mean, to me, that means things like talking to people in Kelly's Corner. At one point, it was, somebody mentioned that, I think Doug brought this idea forward. I was at a 2020 committee meeting about talking to the Kelly's Corner businesses about making a business improvement district there, and Doug's now leaving, but it seems to me that's the kind of economic development piece that this person might, take the initiative to try to take on.
Well, if I might, I mean, one of the reasons I kind of combined the two, which is, as Peter mentioned, is back during the budget cycle, and many of you remember we had to figure out how we were going to accommodate the increase in the Middlesex County retirement. So we had two positions we had been proposing, one the land use director and one the economic development director. We had noticed that there had been a few towns, Natick, the most recent, that were recruiting a land use director / economic development director. So we started doing some research, talked to Natick, looked at their job description. Also at the Mass Municipal Association's annual meeting in Boston back in January, I went to a booth that was the Donahue Institute at UMass Boston, and they do a lot of kind of think tank studies, et cetera, for municipalities, and the person that was running the booth hooked me up with a member of the Donahue Institute, a gentleman named Mark Melnick, who specializes in economic development in municipalities, had worked for the Boston Redevelopment Corporation. And we had a lengthy talk one day, and in fact, he is willing to come in and help us get structured in terms of how we could assist this position in getting started with economic development. But one of the things he talked about, and it was really, he was talking about it from his Boston experience, was, what we're trying to solve with the land use department was one of the big problems he saw in Boston, where you had a lot of entities that they weren't on the same page in terms of permitting, they weren't on the same page with software, and all that kind of lack of communication really impacted economic development. So, to me, it made some sense that, land use management, permit tracking, permit processing is also a key component of economic development, and it made sense to me that the land use director be focused on that. So in another sense, we've always felt that the finance department model worked pretty well. We have separate divisions, such as clerk, treasurer, assessing, et cetera, with the finance director. Now, the finance director oversees that operation. Now, doesn't necessarily get into the day-to-day pieces of assessing or clerk or what have you, but make sure everybody is focused, make sure everybody is working from the same playbook, has the same goals, that when the Board of Selectmen set goals, I communicate those goals to my department heads, and they make sure those goals get carried on through the organization. So, kind of using that as a model, we have some land use divisions. There's some, the interesting thing about, I think, the land use department will be that, you have kind of your basic divisions such as, planning, health, building, but then you have some kind of indirects, some dotted lines you might want to think about. For example, engineering. Engineering plays a role in land use because they review subdivision plans, et cetera. So this land use director needs to make sure that communication happens. Fire department actually, and police department actually, big part of land use, because once again, looking at plans, looking at how traffic's going to flow, whether there's adequate access for fire control, et cetera, also is kind of a dotted line piece of land use. So, there was a lot of thought that went into this, and one of my, my goals would be to try to hire somebody, as early as we could into the fiscal year, because one of the key land use directors, that being Doug Halley, will be retiring in October, and I want this position to play a role in finding a replacement for Doug, although finding a replacement for Doug is probably not the right term. And, in terms of the selection process, one of the things I've been thinking about, and I did it for fire chief, we did it for deputy police chief, is basically kind of what we call an assessment center, where we would bring candidates in, kind of have some like real-life, real-time simulations with a panel who would review, see how people react in situations, and grade accordingly. I think it tends to be a new trend in terms of interviewing, in particular at higher level positions, because you get a chance to see how somebody may think on their feet in a kind of simulated scenario, and get away from kind of the traditional interviews about why are you interested in the job, and what are your three biggest accomplishments and three biggest failures and things like that. You get to see how people react. So that's kind of, I guess, my view in a nutshell.
So, and I think, and perhaps when you speak to, but we had some interest from other committees that wanted to weigh in. So do you want to speak to that, Peter?
Right, and I talked to Steve about that this afternoon. I mean, this does cut across, a wide range of different committees that deal with open space, and even the FinCom may have interest in, how this position or what priorities this position should be working on. I've heard from two committees, Acton 2020 and the Green Advisory Board, which would not seem to have a particular interest in this, but they're going to be discussing it at their meeting, and so is 2020. And so I just have a feeling that it'd be good to have some public process before this person gets hired. And so I was talking to Steve about just sending something to all the boards and committees and with this job description and saying, if you want to have, get us ideas about how best to use this person or what their priorities should be or how they can best serve your committee, put something on the agenda for May 18th and let people come in and talk to us or send us emails or whatever. I'm concerned about a couple of things in opening up the process. First of all, Steve is the guy we hire to, design positions and fill them. So this we're not going to be writing job descriptions by a committee. But there might be ideas that people would have that would inform, us and Steve about different priorities that, might be structured a little different way. And secondly, the time thing that Steve just mentioned. I think if we did it by May 18th and he then was able to take it from there, we could get somebody by shortly after July 1st, I would hope. But I don't know how much time you think you're going to take in filling the position. But 3 months, okay, well, that's a concern then, yeah, so, but those are just my thoughts. I don't know, I don't hear what people have to say, so.
Janet?
Yeah, my eyebrows are shooting up as you're talking about having all these people, well, because I've heard from some committees too. No, I heard from the Acton Community Housing Corporation because it involves affordable housing, and I think I'm looking at this description, which basically has everything but the kitchen sink in here, which is why I was a little concerned about having everybody coming in and telling us what they'd like to see or how they'd like this guy, this poor person, who's going to have to be paid zillions of dollars to be able to take this job, because it basically sounds like he's going to be doing everything for everybody, except for what the town manager's doing, which is the other part of the town business. But I assume that there's some plan to have affordable housing sort of under the umbrella of this guy, because planning is under here. I think that we're talking about succession planning, because at some point Nancy will decide to move off and have fun with her life instead of running the Acton Community Housing Corporation. So I think that the planning department has been more involved in getting and is getting familiar with affordable housing, and we have the Regional Housing Services Coordinator, so I think that will be an ongoing service that we'll continue to use. Because
in fact, we have our annual town managers meeting tomorrow afternoon with Regional Housing.
But I noticed that there are references to, there's references to affordable housing under job duties, basically about develop and implement coordinated approaches and creative solutions to land use management issues in the community, such as open space, land acquisition, historic preservation, affordable housing. And then there's somewhere in here, there's a reference to comprehensive permits, which I know is the Zoning Board of Appeals and is Chapter 40B, which is another, it's another vehicle for affordable housing, maybe not the only one. I know I've talked to you before about the issue of this stormwater bylaw, which is only a fraction of what the town is going to have to do under the EPA's regulations, and it's going to require a lot of coordinated compliance effort. I know Doug is probably, well, he's one of the people who's very familiar with some of the issues, at least from the Health Department, Board of Health perspective. Roland, but all the department heads are starting to get up to speed on it for what they have to do, the bylaw aside. So I'm hoping that the director will also have at least some familiarity with the concept of the MS4 permit, won't kind of completely blank out if you mention it during this sort of the hypothetical situation. It would be helpful to have somebody supervising, because that was what I was thinking too, is it'd be good to have somebody to supervise all of the departments when they're trying to coordinate their efforts to comply. So, and I certainly, from the beginning, I didn't think it was another layer of unnecessary bureaucracy when it was just the land use director, because I was on the Conservation Commission, as was Peter, and I saw how the boards that had to speak about the same project weren't necessarily talking with each other, or were getting frustrated because another board would have already preempted the ability of subsequent boards to sort of upset the apple cart and come up with a different decision. So I think it's very good. And as long as you can assure that, if Nancy comes to talk to you, that affordable housing is going to be under this umbrella, then I think that will answer her concern.
Well, I think, affordable housing is a key component of land use management. So, definitely. But I'm also meeting with some representatives of Economic Development Committee on Thursday morning.
Okay, Franny?
That's news to me. But I'm on the Economic Development Committee. I would think I would. Maybe it will be different by the end of tonight. I wanted to just say that the EDC was one of the committees that really wanted to make sure they had support from this position. So when it says, and including but not limited to the Historic District Commission, et cetera, I was hoping EDC could really be mentioned. I also am concerned about inviting committees to that meeting, because not all the committees can meet beforehand to have consensus on what they would want to say. So maybe it should just be individuals who want to have input, and they should give input about their committees, but I mean, they give their opinion.
They can't, their personal opinion.
Right, their personal opinion.
Yeah. Some of them will speak for their committees, even if they're not authorized to do so. I know that from experience, but,
So.
So, yeah, I mean, my only concern, again, is going down the realm of building a horse by committee, or in this case, by 20 different committees. The coming up with job descriptions is really sort of under the purview of the town manager. And I think it's fine, if you're comfortable waiting until the 18th, I think it's fine to have committees sort of put it out and say, this is the deadline. If you're able to offer comments either as a committee or as an individual, send them or come on the 18th. But, no guarantees. And, I think the outcome of that meeting should just be taking in information, and then the town manager makes, sort of considers all of that and revises the job description or not as he sees fit, because the person's really, reporting to you, and the job has to make sense to you. So, I think we just want to be careful about kind of how much purview we're giving to other committees, but if it's just sort of explaining that, we're open to advisement, or suggestions, and if it turns out there are areas of suggested improvement, that's great. But I don't want it to be so detailed or it's not going to please everybody, a job description. So, I think
I mean,
we
part of the
just
thing
wanna
with the
tread
job
carefully.
description is, you have to be kind of flexible with it.
Right.
Because, God help us, we don't want to get something where somebody says, well, that's not in my job description. So you have to kind of like,
Exactly. Well,
got to
it's
throw
so
everything in there,
detailed,
and
sometimes they say, yeah.
But, a lot of it's going to depend on the skills and abilities of the candidates we actually have. And, some people may be a little more skilled in certain areas than others. But, if that's the case, then you have to build, take advantage of their strengths and help build on their weaknesses, so to speak.
Thank you. I agree with all that. I am a little concerned that people might feel if they don't have an opportunity to speak to this, that they, they weren't heard, or and this is such a big interest to everybody. I think it's a good opportunity to not only talk about the job description and maybe, how our committee could maybe use this person. I don't know. Again, I saw the same thing Franny did about the Economic Development Committee not being listed. That might be a good thing to add, but also just the future of the town, how we want to build out, and what's going to, there's a lot going on. Kelly's Corner is finally, something is going to happen. I think after 25 years of studies and all kinds of stuff, I'm very confident in the Kelly's Corner Steering Committee and the CISO group that we'll be moving forward with building the Kelly's Corner out, and the new water requirements and everything. So I think just having people, say what is on their priorities might be helpful.
No, I think it's good. I will also say, it's not as though this job description is new. We've talked about it in public session before, and it's been out there. So, there's also a part of me that, sometimes people come very late to the game and then want to change things, and we need to be conscious of that as well. But again, I'm open to inviting comment, and I think it's fine as long as we're doing it by a set date.
Yeah, part of that would be how the whatever communication goes out gets worded, so I can work on that, and, obviously be acceptable to Steve, so, but it would express kind of what we're talking about, I think, so.
We've got a member of the audience that has a comment, sir.
Dick Kellenrella, Notre Dame Road. I haven't seen a copy of the job description, Peter, so is it available publicly?
Yeah, it's on, if you go on the DocuShare, it should be in tonight's
Okay.
packet.
It is still a draft. It's still in draft form, but
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, I sit as vice chair of the Economic Development Committee, and we've talked for a long time about a major role of that job, the Economic Development Director, is to safeguard the interest of businesses already in this town and to attract new businesses to come to Acton. So I hope that's somewhere in the job description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, the job description is very general, and it certainly encompasses that, but that's the kind of detail that, maybe we'd like to hear before we fill this position, and look for candidates that have those kind of skills to help out. So, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, if you want a copy, it's also online for everybody. So, okay, so if Peter and Steve, if you want to work on a communication to all the boards, just sort of welcoming input by May 18th, either officially from a board or unofficially as 6, yeah, exactly. We don't even, well, that's hopefully made. Okay, excellent. I think that does that. Any other comment from the public? No? Okay, I wasn't sure if you were coming up, Kat, or leaving. Okay, last thing, close to last thing, discussion of liaison assignments. So thank you, everyone. We sent out sort of a doodle poll asking people to fill in requested assignments, and the way I sort of went through it is that if you were the liaison to the committee last year and asked for it again this year, you get first dibs on that. And then, for new ones, it'll sort of be based on seniority. So I've done an initial filling in based on the sheet in front of you, based on people's responses. The way that the numbers, and actually there are two changes, a couple changes I want to point out. So I took off no place for hate because I don't think they're a committee anymore.
No,
So I know there's the Diversity
yeah.
Coalition, but,
The program has ended. The
Right.
Anti-Defamation League just discontinued it nationally, so
Right.
they will be dissolving locally. It's
Right.
taking them a while, but yeah, they're going away.
and so I don't know that we necessarily need an official liaison to the Diversity
No,
Coalition.
that's really a
Yeah.
community group, so.
Exactly. So I sort of just took that off, and then Franny, you pointed out that open space, we had that wrong, so you had been the liaison to it?
Right, but I guess it's irrelevant because I see you put me down.
Oh, I did put you
for
there.
this year, so.
That's weird, all right. Well, maybe you were the only one, I think, maybe that selected that, so, okay. So, the way the numbers, and actually I want to make one more change on, I had put Ching Sung under senior tax. I'd sort of just put you on open ones that people hadn't selected.
Yeah.
But under senior tax relief, I realized, I had to give that up, but I realized it was in part because it was a daytime committee, and those don't generally work for you either.
No, they
Okay,
do not.
so Franny, we were thinking that might be a good fit for you. They meet irregularly, it's not a monthly meeting or anything, but, you know, being with having council on aging and that kind of stuff. So that would bump you, so I would, right now, have 9 committees, the 3 of you have 11, and Ching Sung only has 4. So my recommendation is that you guys each give up 1 to 2 committees to him.
Yeah, of course.
And so again, you know, the way we do it is sort of based on seniority, so it's sort of your pick, but, you know, you can ask Ching Sung if he has any preferences or however you wanna do it. And I'm sorry, you kind of it's tough coming in the year where there's only one person, because you're the low guy on the totem pole, so you only sort of get what,
No, I understand. I don't know if I could express some preferences. Would that be all right?
again, up to them about, you know, which ones, yeah.
I mean,
And I
Okay.
think I highlighted here the ones that you had expressed preferences in. The X's are the ones that I've already given you, so Cable Advisory Committee, Acton TV, that.
Katie,
I would say
one
my-
of the things, I think last year, Mike, you included with the rail trails, Mike had dropped them out. I mean,
Yeah.
I was the liaison, 2 years ago, but they're really moving along, and I'm continuing to follow
Right.
them to some extent, but honestly, there really isn't a need.
Yeah, so
There are
I
a lot of
didn't-
people who are familiar with, so we just dropped those off.
Yeah, so I didn't count them towards your number, so you're at 11 without those.
So
But I did
are
just
you?
kind
Oh,
of, yeah, I just kind of
okay.
left your name on them. But, right, we can take them off as official liaison.
My preference is actually more of a timing preference. It tends to be Tuesdays and Thursdays are my more open evenings, and so I would prefer stuff that meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
So that's a little, I mean, but,
I don't know if people are familiar with those assignments and when they generally meet. That's more of my preference, but.
I'm happy to give you the Economic Development Committee. I'm sorry to leave my recently made friends on the EDC, but since that meets on Thursday nights, and it's twice a month, you're actually on some committees you're just the liaison, and some you actually are on. You're actually on the EDC when you're the liaison.
so actually, I think that brings you down to 9, because I think I somehow also had you on ActonTV, Franny. And
Oh, really?
there shouldn't have been a check there, so with that, I think that brings you down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, that does bring me down.
Yeah, and there was one where nobody, I think, had selected it. Hold on. No, there are 2 that Mike's on, right, that he's still going to do, so Lowell Regional Transit,
Right. Yeah,
and the
Mike
Regional
was gonna
Transportation
keep on
Advisory
being the-
Council. Right. So why don't you stay, just give up the EDC, because then you're down to 9, and then if you guys could do 1 or 2 more.
Well, you got Ching Sung down for the Route 2 Corridor Advisory Committee. Is that Mike's second?
No, the second one is the,
Lowell Transit Authority.
yeah, and the
Mike-
Regional Transportation Advisory
I
Council.
don't, I don't even know, I mean, this list you were using, Archive of Innovation for I-495, that's for the 495 Metro West Partnership, and it's really I don't even know if it should be on there, because the only reason I'm the liaison is because I'm on the
You're
Board of
actually a member.
Directors.
I can take it off, I mean, that's fine.
Which gets me down to 10.
But he's still only at 5, so you're gonna have to go up either way.
I mean, Tuesday, Thursday, Thursday is, ACHC, which I don't want to give up. The Cultural Council typically meets Monday, the Board of Appeals meets Monday when we meet, the Water District meets Monday when we meet, Conservation usually meets Wednesday, DRB usually meets Wednesday, FinCom meets Tuesday, but I ain't giving that up. Minuteman, I never go to the meetings, but I confer with the representative. And well, the Water District Land Management Committee, I don't, that's really part of the Water District. And at one point, John Sonner had that, and I had the Water District, and I really don't know what the Water District Land Management Committee does. I don't even know if we need to have them on there. They deal with land issues, but they're advisory to the Water District. The Water District is the principal one. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to have it listed separately.
So you want that should just be one committee?
Just don't list that, because I don't think,
Okay.
and just because the Water District is the main.
Janice gotten herself down to 9 without giving anything up.
Well, see, I'm
Is
just
the Water
deleting
District
some of
on
these
here?
things, and I think that
Yeah, Water
some of them shouldn't
Resources
be
Advisory
there.
Committee.
And I'll continue to do the 495 thing, but,
So Peter, we got to give you to give up 2.
When is the sidewalk committee?
I don't know.
Let's see if they have.
I mean, some things, like I'm the Board of Health, they meet when we meet, so I pretty much never can go to their meeting, but I still try to, liaison with them and go when I can.
and the school committee meets Thursday, but you're not giving
I'm
that up.
not giving that up. And I'm at 9.
Second Wednesday of each month is sidewalk. The Housing Authority is the last Thursday of every month. They're a separate entity, basically. They meet out at Windsor Green, but they meet at 4 o'clock, so I don't know, you working?
Last Thursday? I didn't get out of work early one day, that shouldn't be a problem.
It's once a month. I mean, these committees don't meet every week.
Right, they meet once a month, last Thursday of every month, so.
Okay. So Peter, can I get you to give up one more?
Okay, hold on. Housing Authority. The Board of Assessors, I don't go to the meetings. That's a particular skill that they have. It's a technical skill, assessing properties, values. You would learn a lot about town government going there, how they control a separate fund called the overlay account. I don't know what day they meet, let me see if I can look at that. They meet at 6 o'clock, I don't remember what day. Their meetings are very haphazard, because they have a hard time getting a quorum together, and I think there are certain times of the year when they have to meet more often than.
Well, you could get the time of year where they consider tax day.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Third or fourth,
Do you want to do board? I mean, it'll also just be what your preference is for committees you want or don't. Don't want, we don't want to be saying.
That's fine.
Okay, so that brings you down. Make sure all my numbers are right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 6, 7, 8, 9. 6, 7, 8, 9. Just count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 6, 7. So 9997. I mean, it's close enough, but if you've got constraints on nights, that probably is best, and good to have a lighter load your first year. Okay, so is everybody sort of comfortable with the liaison assignments as changed?
Yeah.
With your maneuvering?
I just crossed a lot of mine off the list, even though some of them I'm going to still go to, but no.
What we do is we put the liaisons into the email shelf for the committees, so that we get
Yeah.
all the emails at the committee.
Although some don't, like I don't get school committee emails because they're whatever.
Because they're special.
Housing Authority may be that same.
Yeah, the Housing Authority, for some reason, I remember when I was their liaison, I never got anything. It's
So, but Lisa, I'll update the list with you, and then we'll send it out, and you can send it out to the different committees, and they can add it, or whoever, Mark, or whoever. Perfect, add us to the shell. Okay. Okay, I will do that tomorrow. not tonight. Okay, I'll work on that. Okay, good. I don't think we need a vote on this, so, do we, Steve, need a vote on this at all? No. Okay, so excellent.
Well, we might,
You
if,
want-
for instance, we're appointing somebody to the Economic Development Committee, right? And CPC
Well, that's-
for me, Community Preservation.
Probably the ones that have
Yeah.
standing votes, we need to, yeah.
So, and that's where,
Why don't we just, I mean, if you just do it generically,
True.
do what
Yeah,
everything's
So can I have a
covered.
motion to approve the liaison assignments or committee assignments as noted?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstentions? Okay, thank you. And the last thing we have are just the remaining selectmen reports. So Janet or Franny, are you ready?
The Council on Aging Board met on the day of town meeting, so I wasn't there. I noticed from the notes, there's going to be a June 10th presentation about virtual villages. And the committee is planning on putting a senior survey in for inclusion in the next town census. We sort of decided that last year, and they are moving toward that. And there was a well-attended Lions Club luncheon on St. Patrick's Day. The next meeting's next Monday, May 4th. Transportation Advisory Committee, even though some of us are bike enthusiasts, we still seek bike enthusiasts. And we started meeting only every other month. But if we get busy with something big, we'll do that more. The Regional Coordinating Council met, which is the MassDOT region, including many, many towns, and sort of formed three. This is co-chaired by me and the Maynard Assistant Town Manager, Andrew Scribner. And we sort of formed into three subgroups that we're going to work on: grant making, travel information, which includes travel training, and legislative. It's useful to work with many of the towns around here, even though from going all the way from, Bolton to Bedford, we vary. We do learn from each other's towns. The Cemetery Commission, I want to ask the Board of Selectmen for an okay. So I don't know if maybe we have to put this on an agenda, but the commission moved that it was okay for the Historical Society to do a fundraiser where Civil War era people are portrayed dramatically. They sort of rise out of the graves. And Dr. Mary Donald learned about this last year because they did it in Harvard, Mass. And it sounded like a really effective dramatic event, a good educational event. And so the Historical Society wants to do it as a fundraiser, but the Cemetery Commission wants to ask permission of the Board of Selectmen to do this.
Okay, wait, for clarity. Do you mean reenactors, or do you mean?
Yes. Well,
but
I don't
why are
mean
they
a seance.
reenacting coming out of the grave?
No. I mean, they come, like, they're important people, or just people from the Civil War era, so the Historical Society will research them and have people
Okay.
acting like these people from long ago, and actually it'll be really interesting.
Are they
I'll
doing it
definitely
on town property? Is that
Yeah,
why
on the
there's a request?
cemetery, yeah, in the cemetery.
So Steve, do we need to approve
I have
that?
to look at that, because I was always under the impression that the cemetery commissioners have charge over their own property.
That's what I
Okay, I
thought.
can't remember what their reasoning was, why they thought we had to do it. Maybe because Historical Society was a private group, or something like that. But-
I'll have to look into it.
Okay, if you think we need to,
I don't think we do, but I can look into it.
okay. Economic
It's
Development
not a
Committee,
fun seance.
I think I probably reported on them. Janet came and we discussed the meals tax vote, and there was a motion to support the meals tax, which passed 5-2, and a motion to support the zoning changes that didn't happen at, I always forget the name of the... Brookside Shops, and that passed unanimously. And on May 7th, the EDC is going to attend the 2020 Kelly Corner meeting. And the Senior Center Study Committee met for the second time, and we chose officers. Chris Hamilton will serve as the chair, and Peter Ashton as the co-chair. And a subgroup including Peter Ashton, updated the demographic analysis of Acton seniors, and so we'll post that online. It will be interesting, actually, I think, for people to see. And we heard update estimates of timeline and cost from Dean Charter and his subcommittee, and so it was interesting, and we're moving forward. And we've clarified that, as per our charge, we're just focusing on senior center and maybe considering community services, as part of that. The long range, the Lowell Regional Transit Authority, I was invited to be on the transit plan committee. They're about to hold hearings, and it was by a state law that all the regional transit authorities have to review all of their routes and their fixed routes and come up with a transit plan. And so tomorrow's our second meeting, and then there'll be hearings in the next few weeks, so people can really so each regional transit authority is assessing how they're working. Now, we in Acton don't really have any fixed route from them. We only have the paratransit, the senior vans. And so it doesn't totally help us, but it is relevant, because one of the changes they might consider is that fixed route they have that goes down to Littleton, even though Littleton's not within the Lowell Regional Transit Authority, could go to the train station. It could increase and go as far as the train station, and that affects us. And I shared my dream, and which is to be able to continue that route down through Acton and Maynard, and so that the regional transit authorities could touch, like the Metro West, which is the Framingham-Natick area, could ultimately touch the Lowell Regional Transit Authority's fixed routes, which really makes sense, because people don't stop traveling at the edge of these authorities. That's all.
Janet?
Yeah, I think the new way will be good, because I tend to have I type up all my comments, so I read through them fairly quickly, but anyhow, the Acton Boxborough Cultural Council had their annual grantees reception on April 10th at Sargent Library in Boxborough, starting last Friday, April 24th, and continuing for a month of Fridays at 7 o'clock in this room is their annual film series. Last Friday, it was a collection of film shorts by basically students in different programs in the area universities. They were actually very good, very entertaining, very diverse subjects, and actually surprisingly polished. I was really impressed by even the credits. I'm one of those weird people who watches all the credits at the end of the movie, and I thought, God, they're really very, very spiffy looking. Anyhow, the series will continue this Friday with a 50th anniversary edition of A Hard Day's Night, very cleaned up, remastered, and much better quality probably than the original film, which some of us are old enough to have seen when it first came out. The Acton Community Housing Corporation has, as somebody mentioned, organized this housing production plan workshop on May 14th at 7 o'clock in this room. The Acton Water District on April 13th had their elections. Ron Parenti, well, they have 3 commissioners, and they keep switching off for the past 20 or so years. They've been switching off who gets to be the chairman. This year, it's Ron Parenti. There was some discussion of the new South Acton water treatment plant, and at that time, it wasn't quite up and running, but it was close. And they did mention, as I told Steve and Peter, that they plan to start repaving the disturbed roadways, Parker High School, et cetera, supposedly, I guess last week, but they don't seem to have started. I don't know if it's the weather or what, because usually asphalt they usually have to have warmer weather. The warmer the better, so maybe that's why, or nothing seems to be happening, right? There's some other project that hasn't started, and I know it's the train station stuff. They also talked about the StarMet site in Concord and the concerns that some stuff has migrated from that site into the Assabet Wells, including some stuff that maybe was attributed to the W.R. Grace plant, but they're planning to hire an attorney to provide them with some guidance, and they and some other parties that are interested in what's happening with the StarMet site would like to have a monitoring well somewhere off of Knox Trail. So more on that later. It did come up during the meeting that Concord Town Meeting had just approved, because they were in the middle of their very long 4-night town meeting, had approved $200,000 for improvements at the 37 Knox Trail property that Concord bought to provide them with access to the W.R. Grace land in Concord. Let's see, they're meeting tonight, which is why I'm not there, and they have the same items on the agenda, so maybe I'm not missing much. Conservation Commission finally approved the Quail Ridge Conservation Restriction, reviewed by council, incorporating all of the Department of Environmental Protection changes and the Conservation Commission changes. That's been in progress, I think, might have been since I was on the Conservation Commission, and it eventually will come to this board for approval. And they also had some continued discussion of the Assabet River Rail Trail, the part that goes to Maynard. There's going to be a section that's a very elevated boardwalk over wetlands, and apparently the Army Corps of Engineers has opined that it's not going to have a permanent impact on the wetlands because it's so high up. The installation will have temporary impact because they have to do what's called dewatering in order to put in the pilings or whatever it is. But in any event, they haven't closed the hearing on that. They had to get some more information. Land Stewardship Committee is going through a transition because Jim Snyder Grant, who's been chairman forever, is planning to stop being chairman, and it's not clear who will succeed him because nobody's eager to replace him. But they talked about the new Harris Street property. I noted that generations of selectmen have been hearing about that property, and it's really great to get it off of the list now. But they're hoping that maybe there will be some storage space for some of the land stewards' equipment, because they have different things that they use to work on the lands, and it'd be nice to have some centralized place to store it. Bettina at that meeting mentioned that the final open space and recreation plan approved by the state got published. It covers the 2014 to 2021, finally done. And the last thing they talked about was dog poop bag disposal issues on some of the conservation lands, because people will collect the poop in the bag and then they'll fling it into the woods, and it'd be better if they just flung the poop without the bags, because the bags don't deteriorate very fast. But apparently there are some people in the Arboretum area, Sid Levin and some other neighbors, who actually voluntarily every spring go out and collect. They pick up the dog poop bags, the dog poop, whatever. It's an ongoing problem, and I think that there are some communities that have signs that say, pick up after your pet, or we will close this to dogs or animals or whatever. Water Resources Advisory Committee met on the 16th with Council Rebecca Lacey to talk about her suggested revisions to the stormwater bylaw. They were really good. They actually streamlined the bylaws so that I was able to read through the whole thing without getting stuck. And I had my own suggestions. Rebecca will be meeting with them sometime in May. Town manager has okayed this. So, and they're aiming to, in June 17th, to have a public session to explain what the stormwater bylaw is. And then if we're having a special town meeting in the fall, they would aim to have the proposal on the warrant. And as Franny already mentioned, Economic Development Committee, and I was sort of pleased that I got a supportive vote, if not a unanimous vote. Let's see, TRB, the proponents of all that Mass Ave construction, the commercial construction, there's going to be a meeting to talk about Phase 3 Thursday. There's an update meeting with the proponents. Roland Bartle invited me, and Katie said it was fine if I went and sort of represented the Board of Selectmen at that meeting. And then on other matters, there have been other things. The 495 Metro West Partnership had a Water Resources Committee meeting talking about this draft stormwater set of regulations that the EPA has issued that everybody's scrambling to comply with. And I was pleased to see that town staff from the engineering and health departments were there. And they also had their annual awards reception at Quest Diagnostics in Marlborough, which is a completely overhauled facility. It was a collaboration between the mayor of Marlborough was very helpful in working with the businesses to try to overhaul the place. But they have They gave the private sector award to the president and CEO of Atlantic Management, which oversaw the redevelopment of that whole area. And the building now is home to Quest Diagnostics, GE Healthcare, and there's 1.505 million square feet of office and lab space, 350 one- and two-bedroom residential units, 153 room Hilton Garden Inn, and 75,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space. So it's a major, major kind of sort of rehabilitation of an area that I guess must have been pretty dead before. And the public sector award went to a selectman from Framingham who's been pretty active in not just the 495 Metro West organization, but other organizations. Franny mentioned I guess you didn't talk about the Diversity Coalition meeting because you weren't there. They are in transition. I mean, they've barely gotten started, but they are seeking to take over the annual Martin Luther King breakfast from the now defunct No Place for Hate organization, which has been under the umbrella of the Temple Beth Elohim. And I think that they're also likely to revisit their mission because it's very broad and kind of covers everything, too many things. I think that there's some interest in getting back to the original sort of racial, cultural sensitivity issues that originally inspired some people to get together 2 years ago to talk. But anyhow, some members will be screening a documentary, I guess, called Slavery by Another Name this Friday. Girl Scout tour, I mentioned that briefly, but I did it with the town manager and the HR director, a little group of Girl Scouts. They came up here and they sat at the tables. Marianne Fleckner, the HR director, very creative. She had the girls write down what careers they hope to pursue on a piece of paper, seal the papers in an envelope, and write in the envelope, do not open until I think it was 2022 when they're supposed to be graduating from high school. She said she got the idea from her son. Her son did that, and he wrote down that he wanted to be an engineer, and that is what he is. So it was really... It was really, and then the town manager provided all this swag, all pads and pens and all that, which they actually used during the course of the meeting, and Janet just provided charm. No. Patriots Day, on Monday, I actually joined, my husband and I and my college roommate who was staying over joined the Minutemen because they go down Strawberry Hill Road, so we joined them. Went down to Barrett's Mill Road when it was starting to kind of sprinkle, so we headed back home, and then my roommate and I drove to Concord, and we actually, it was pouring rain, and all the fighters had disappeared, and we said, okay, you're here, you got to go over the North Bridge. And then I realized the Caesar Robbins house, the little emancipated slave house, is just right across the parking lot, so we went there. I'd wanted to see it, and we're standing there in the pouring rain, looking at the sign, and I'm thinking, oh crap, it's closed, and then this man happens along with keys and says, oh, were you hoping to get inside? And I said, well, you're closed. Well, I can open it up. I'm opening it up for a tour. And so, of course, we went in and got to see the inside of it. And I found out that there is an organization called the Toni Morrison Society that has something called Bench by the Road, whereby they commemorate sites of significance in African American history with a bench that has a little plaque on it. And so Concord has two. And I am interested to find out if Acton has any sites that are deserving of a Toni Morrison bench. And finally, I went to the Council on Aging last Friday. There was a tribute to the volunteers. Said a few words on behalf of the board. And interestingly, our former esteemed chairman, Mr. Gowing, was there in the audience as the handyman, and he was about to go and assist somebody in flipping a mattress. So of course, when I started my remarks, I said, oh, and that's another moniker, Mattress Flipper Mike. So anyhow, but that's it.
Okay, it'll be a little bit shorter. I volunteered with the Acton Democratic Town Committee annual food drive. I was at Donlands. I do it at Donlands, and Roche Brothers are both nice enough to host us, and the patrons of those two stores donated over $4,500 in food and supplies to the Acton Box Row Food Pantry, so it was a great event. The Recreation Commission met, and they are starting to do outreach to get input on renovating the playground at Jones Field, so keep an eye out for a survey that they'll be putting out in various formats to get feedback on that. And the Natural Resource Department and the Recreation Department are working to put together, now that they finished the Open Space and Recreation Plan, to put together an updated master plan for NARA, because it's about time for a new one of those. And the Acton Memorial Library Board of Trustees met. They're still looking for a new assistant director. They've had to repost the position as the preferred candidate from the last round withdrew and had accepted a position elsewhere. And they realized that this year is the 125th anniversary of the library. So they're discussing how to commemorate that. And as part of that discussion that night, Marcia had mentioned, the director had mentioned that they had these booklets of the history of the Memorial Library, so I passed those out to all of you. They had done this for the 100th anniversary, so hopefully more to come on 125th anniversary events. Okay, and then just a reminder, next time for reports to get them to Lisa. There shouldn't be much between now and Wednesday, but get them to Lisa by... Yeah, right, yeah, so would Thursday morning be too late, because you posted on Thursday? Yes, wouldn't be too late? Okay, yeah, so that might be better, if you did like 9 AM Thursday, but none of this, pushing that, I know how you, okay, motion to adjourn, please.
Second.
Okay, all right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? All right. So, Peter, I don't know if you opened your mail, but